Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We have a full NFL show today. But before I get into that, because I feel like the basketball tournament's going on right now, and I just wanted to get this off my chest because I know it's going to I'll forget about it once I get into some of my NFL rants. But the NCAA, they announced that their television ratings are up. But they didn't announce that they also didn't have overlapping games. And so as they're trying not to pay players, I just wonder, some of the decisions they make just don't make sense. Like, they put on this Gonzaga USC game in prime time. So as we're doing the show Tuesday night, for longtime listeners, they know we record it live on Facebook. You can watch it on our Facebook. Just search for Southbound Sports. And we release it as a podcast on Wednesday. So these games are over. Gonzaga's up 20 points right now. There's like 3 minutes left. It wasn't going to be a good game. Like, I think everyone knows Gonzaga's head and shoulders above everyone. And so most of these teams in the tournament are on the West Coast. Like, you have the Texas teams, they're in a different time zone. And then you have a Michigan come in, and they put Michigan, and I know they're playing a West Coast team in UCLA, but they put that game on at 10. Like, if you're going to talk about ratings and how you're making more money this year, you would think that they would make better business sense moves. Like, they were ready to move the games for BYU, but yet they put this game on. So just wait, because I wanted to just talk about it, because we're going to get into some NFL stuff right away and their TV contract, because they know the games, they matter when you put them on TV. That's how you get the salary cap. That's why the Steelers are getting screwed this year on salary cap. It's because of the TV deals and the NFL backtracking on some of them. And it was also on ticket sales. So, like, you're having these guys play, and you put the better matchup on because it features teams like Michigan has a national audience. Nothing against Gonzaga and USC, but I wouldn't be surprised if next week when we do the show, and I always bring up the ratings anyway, that you see that the Elite Eight and the Final Four ratings dropped. And the NCAA right now is parading around about how they raised ratings in the earlier rounds. So I wanted to bring that up. Another thing, too, the NCAA kicked Oregon State out of their hotel room last night in the middle of the night so that they could catch a red-eye flight and arrive back in Oregon at, 4 in the morning? Like, they already paid for the hotel rooms. They had to have, because they didn't know who was going to win. And the hotel doesn't give you a refund if you check in at 3 p.m. or whatever normal check-in is, and you leave before your checkout. So, like, what are they doing? I'll never understand it. It's annoying me, and it's going to lead right into the NFL thing, because the NFL decided to expand their regular season to 17 games. And I'm not annoyed by it, but I feel bad for the players. And I want to get your thoughts on this as a coach. They are just some background for people that aren't following it. They finally approved it. So there's going to be a 17-game season. I believe they're moving the start of the season up to, it's usually Labor Day. It's probably going to be before that. So we'll have to keep a track on that for fantasy drafts. And they're also going to get rid of 1 week of preseason. That's why I don't think the timelines will shift. At least if the NFLPA doesn't, they don't push back and they just let the NFL walk all over them, I think that the schedule should stay the same. Like, they have the same off season. The only difference is it starts a week earlier because you cut off that 4th preseason game. But as a coach, don't you think that the wear and tear on these players is going to cause even more injuries, Matt?
There's a possibility of doing that. I know for years people have made the argument that, well, why have so many preseason games? It's just wasting time. No one really cares about the preseason games. To your point about the ratings, a lot of times those preseason ratings, they're not the greatest, because they're featuring a lot of the backup players that only real junkies for football like me and you would even follow through with a matchup knowing that none of the key people are going to be playing. So I can kind of understand where they're saying, there's these meaningless preseason games. And at least if you're going to have the players playing, make that an opportunity to be a matchup that's going to be worth something. So to that end, I can understand why they would want to make that determination. Um, I think it's like anything when you make changes that there's going to be people on both sides that complain. I don't mind it because they're not messing with the time of year, the total number of games, the amount of like breaks and things like that. Like I think you may see some injuries, but I don't think it's going to be outside of the norm.
See, I'm looking at just more longevity of the players. Like we already know the running backs only last a couple of years. You've seen quarterbacks in the past couple of years just all go down, starting with like Peyton Manning. His arm turns to rubber. Ben Roethlisberger fades down the stretch. Drew Brees fades down the stretch. And he even thought about coming back. I mean, it was clear he did. Otherwise, he would have announced it way earlier, his retirement. He fades down the stretch. It seems like the only person that doesn't is Tom Brady for some reason. But you have all of these guys, and now you're adding in another week. And so normally players usually get that last week or two rest. How many games are you going to lose now in meaningful games in the regular season? Because you look at this year, like you had a losing team make the playoffs and win the NFC East. Like you're going to get a couple of games that matter, but I think the more games you add, you're going to start diluting the season to the point where and maybe the owners, they want it, but the more talented teams are going to come out on top. And so with the preseason, yeah, I know you like normally if you're a college football fan, that's when you're going to see some of the guys play that you liked and you're hoping that they make the roster because they weren't like the biggest or the fastest. Maybe they didn't even get invited to the combine. But you can see them play there and hope they stick it on special teams and get a chance. Now they're losing one game. I really don't care. To be honest, I don't even know if they need a preseason because, like, look at this year. Was there any difference? Like, there was no preseason, right?
Right.
They just did inter-squad scrimmages. And so why can't they just do that? Like, the teams already work together. It doesn't have to be televised. It's just more greedy television money. Like, you're looking at, and I'm just comparing it to the NCAA tournament because it's the biggest thing right now. The NCAA tournament, what they used to do on Thursday and Friday, they'd have double games going. So, like, you could only watch all of the games if you went to their app, and they had streaming. And for whatever reason, a lot of television like companies, they're so behind on the internet, they don't know how it works, that they still don't know how to get streaming numbers, or at least, like, you could just float ads, which is another thing I want to talk about because I don't want to forget it. I was trying to watch the tournament game, and over top of the score, just to show you how inept some of these companies are, the CBS ran a weather alert for almost the entire game. Which game was it? I put a tweet out from Southbound Sports so other people would see it. I think it was the Oregon State game.
Yep.
And Loyola. So they changed it, Matt. I mean, they definitely saw what we put out there because they had this ticker going. And even like the NCAA pays for like the placement. They have the trademark for March Madness, TBS or whatever's on there. So they have the March Madness logo on the top right. The local news or whatever, they put a map of North Carolina in the top right for almost no reason. Like their tech guy couldn't just flip it to the left side of the screen. There's nothing there. Or just put the ticker at the top. And they kept flipping it. So like you could see that they were trying to adjust it. They'd move it to the bottom for like a half second and then put it up. And by the third time they did that, like they must have said, all right, every couple minutes, move it to the bottom so people can check the score. But if you had that technology, like, which I know you do, it's basically just an overlay. Like, just put it down there. And so, like, the NFL, they're trying to do all this stuff. And look at what the NBA is doing. The NBA is attracting a ton of new fans because they focus on social media. All they do is post highlights and clips and stuff like that. The NFL would issue a takedown notice immediately. They don't like people seeing footage of their games. They want, like, these old people to just pay for NFL All Access or whatever, because we talked about it during the coronavirus last year. When the coronavirus started, they were giving it away for free, trying to give people a taste in May, when nothing else was on. So it's like, okay, do that now, but just make the preseason that. Just get rid of it. You don't need it at all. It's such an old-timey thing where it's like these professional guys, I guess it's good for rookies, but just have some scrimmages. There are local teams from the other division that you can scrimmage. Washington can go and play at Baltimore, and they can scrimmage. The Steelers could go to Carolina or somewhere, and they can scrimmage where it's a little bit warmer. And you could just match up teams around. I mean, you could even find one of the NFC East. Pittsburgh could go to Philadelphia if the Jets or whatever. So, I mean, they could do something. They've been doing it anyway. So people think that preseason is the first game. It's not. Who cares? The NFL could cut and make it just make it whatever they want to do. If they want to do 18 games, 19 games, just cut the season. The players get paid more. They have a better chance for incentives. They're holding on to this idea that the statistics might not matter, because after a while, you add another game, someone's bound to break all the old records. But who cares? Records are made to be broken. You can put a little asterisk if people want to toggle it. Just have a database. People can look it up. They can see the difference. You can just go by averages, average per game, and see which players are Hall of Fame level. But that's my biggest beef with it, is you're moving to 17 games. Is that next game going to be better? Most likely, no. You're not going to get another good game.
It depends on how it's going to be scheduled, though.
Go ahead, what?
It depends on how it's going to be scheduled, because when I looked at how they were planning on doing it, I think it made sense, because they were saying the added game is going to feature teams from opposing conferences that finished in the same place within their division the previous season. So they're going to look at who is the third place, the first place in the AFC North versus first place in the NFC North, and kind of doing it in that type of draw, which I think you have the potential of that last week. Instead of it, you may have some must-win games that are going to be matched up against someone that's a quality opponent, as opposed to having the number one seed playing some scrub and it being completely worthless.
But how many teams are still the top number one team from the previous year? Those teams usually fall off, and they fall off pretty hard. The Chiefs would have been playing potentially the 49ers again, a Super Bowl rematch or something. And then the 49ers look like garbage and are all injured. The Chiefs just absolutely kill them. And then you have the Steelers in the middle tier, and then they add a team that they theoretically could just crush. And for me, the big thing is you're adding a game, you're not adding another bye week. I would just want them to get one more bye week. Let the players rest up, and then have a potentially more competitive games down the stretch, because everyone's healthy. The way they do it now, everyone's usually tired down the stretch. Teams are resting players if they're in the playoffs. You see mixed results with it every year. Even playoff teams that are on a bye, they don't know how to handle it. A lot of them come in and they look flat in that game back. So just make it fair. You're looking at the previous year. I know the intentions there. All right, you're going to get a good mix of the upper tier teams. They're usually always going to play the upper tier teams, and they come and go. Because you have the Giants, they make their runs where they're on top for a bit. Maybe they're going to play a cross-sectional Steelers. But what about the AFC North next year? You're going to have 2 or 3 teams that are all top. That's going to bump their records down. And so then they're going to be matched up against other teams. To me, it just doesn't work. You're not going to get meaningful games by adding this game. I just don't care. Just cut it. It's going to be like college football, Matt. They keep adding. They added games. They started with 10. They added 11. Then they're oh, people will start scheduling these harder games. Look back at teams in the 90s and their schedules, and then compare them to now. You don't add harder games. That's not how it works. Because then you have more injuries down the stretch. You have whatever you need. That's one of my biggest beefs with the Big Ten. And I'll get into it more the college basketball stuff. But when you look at the conference, when you're so far behind, and you're just trying to like stick to tradition, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so I want to actually see, and that's going to be what I'm going to look at this year. That 17th game, how many of them actually mean anything? Is it going to be 3, 4? I think that's high. I think you might get 1. But hey, you have anything else on it? I don't want to just shut down your opinion on it.
No, I mean, I think that's a valid argument to make. I think their intentions are good to try to make it so that they're setting the table for some decent matchups. But I think when you look at the way that the salary cap is, you're right. At the end of the day, a lot of these teams flip from year to year. That if coaches leave, players leave, and they could go from first place or second place in the division to the bottom. But I think they're getting closer to trying to find. Like, I think they wanted to be a little bit more accurate with these crossover matchups, and make it, rather than it being a meaningless preseason game, have it be where there's something on the line. So, the games are still the same, and I think just from the coaching standpoint, you just evolve in terms of where do you rest players. I mean, if you're playing a team and you really are, beating them badly, maybe those are opportunities that you start putting in more of your subs and treating it like a college situation, as opposed to running your starters really late into games up a lot of points. You don't typically see that in the NFL because a lot of contracts are driven based off of the financial and like the statistical incentives. So it's like to cut them out of those opportunities to earn their bonuses kind of really puts the players in a tough situation.
Well, I brought up the schedule from last year, and I think the one thing that is going to make it even worse is they're not going to put this game as the last game of the year. Like, they're going to mix it in, and they've been going towards where they have the divisional matchups that final week. I think only one of these mattered. Like, the Dallas Giants had decided the division, right? So you're just adding another week where that game might be separated to the point where it doesn't matter. Like, no one's caring when there's so many matchups against like the top team in the division and the bottom. Like the Baltimore Ravens killing the Bengals didn't matter. Buffalo beat Miami. I don't know if that kept them out of the playoffs. Like, there's only a couple games that I think were really close that really maybe mattered. Like Tennessee, maybe Houston. I don't know if that mattered for seeding. Seattle and San Francisco, or maybe it was Washington and Philadelphia was the one for the East that really mattered, not the Giants one. But I just don't know. Like, I need to see next year what the difference is, because you're adding one more game. It's just, like I said, to me, it's just like college football. You're adding one more game. All it's going to do is separate the records just a little bit more. And by adding that extra game, you're going to give all your playoff teams one more like cushion to rest their guys, to do whatever. I know they're not like scheduling cupcakes like college football did, but you're still having that one more week of separation where you're going to be like looking in the games that are going to matter are going to be the teams that are like 8-8. And it's like,
what?
Do I want to care about that game though?
Here's another point, though. Think about it in terms of this. They're taking that preseason game and almost attaching it at the end of the season, because if a lot of the playoff spots are already locked up and you have two teams that are already in the playoffs, you may see a situation where they're pulling starting running backs and starting quarterbacks and different people and not playing them in that last week's game, knowing that, hey, we got playoffs coming up. Why play in this meaningless week 18 when we know we're going to be in the playoffs the following week, and we want to rest up and be prepared for that. So that may be a chance that in a regular season format, they're already, having opportunities for those players to rest and getting guys meaningful minutes, as opposed to where they know it's preseason, it's early in the year, and typically people play relatively sloppy in the preseason anyhow.
And that's a good point, because that's going to lead me into our next topic for the show. So I think you're right. I think you're going to see a lot of teams not really tanking, but like you're going to see a lot of action with the like what we're seeing right now with the pre-draft trades, particularly almost like the Eagles situation, where and the Dolphins kind of did it too, but I don't think you'll see it on such a grand like crazy scale where they're like telling Tua like you're the starter, maybe not, we're going to pull you or whatever. But like look what the Eagles did. They were like, Wentz is our guy, but we're just going to let Hurts come over and show us what he's doing. Then we're going to fire our coach. And then we're going to go ahead and have him come in and tell him that he's going to have to deal with Wentz. Oh, wait. After meeting him, he's like, I hate, and like, you can't use this guy. Are you serious? Like, even the old coach, like you fired him, I'm going to be fired immediately. So then they're like, all right, we heard it enough. Let's get rid of him. And so then they're like, all right, what are we going to do? Like looking at the Hurts situation. And like, look at the big one that sticks out to me is the 49ers. So the 49ers, they hate Garoppolo so much that like they're driving down his trade value. Nobody wants the guy. Like Matt, if I told you I had a quarterback, I just really need to trade him. Like no, nothing's wrong with the guy. I just really need to get rid of him. Like how would you feel as a coach? Is that a guy you'd want?
Well, it depends on what my situation is. If I need a quarterback, I might be interested in taking them off your hands.
Well, how about let's not even think about it in sports. What if like someone's just like trying to give you their car? Like, hey, we should really swap cars. Like mine used to be like car of the year, like basically car of the year, almost like when Garoppolo took them to the Super Bowl. Like you remember that? That was good times. They announced that. That was only 2 years ago, Matt. So why don't we'll just trade cars real quick. Nothing big. Like that's not going to give you good confidence, right? Like why is this guy trying to push his car on me? That's what they're doing with Garoppolo. So they're driving down his value, and then they're like, all right, we got to trade up. So they traded the Dolphins, and they're going to get the number 3 pick, a weird pick, because there's a clear like number 1 and 2 quarterbacks in this draft, I think. So they're hoping that Trevor Lawrence, like Urban Meyer already came out and said that they're going to go for Trevor Lawrence. And he didn't get confirmation from the owner, but that's where he's leaning, because you don't want to be a new coach where everyone's telling you to get the number 1 quarterback. You're like, nah, we're going to get a different guy. And then if you do bad, everyone hates you. At least if he comes in, Trevor Lawrence doesn't do good. He has like kind of a scapegoat. Like, yeah, he's not really my style of guy. You should give me another couple years. But like the Niners are like, we're going to go with the 3rd guy. There could be 2 quarterbacks taken ahead of him. Someone could take Lawrence. Someone could take Justin Fields. And then I know there's a ton of other quarterbacks, but the 49ers are gambling their future, and they're giving away their number 12 pick, first rounders next year and the year after, so 22 and 23. What do you think of that deal?
You better absolutely love the quarterback or think that you have that guy in the fold. I mean, to me, I'm not that confident in that situation unless, like, we're suspecting that the Niners are going to go the route of quarterback. What if they move up to try to make sure they get the wide receiver that they want?
Matt, you know how crazy that would be? They've already said that it's an insurance policy. They don't want their quarterback being taken. I just don't know what else it would be. Like, I guess if you're looking at like a big time defensive guy, maybe you're trying to spook the second team to pick that quarterback, which I think is Justin Fields, right?
That's what the speculation is.
Because like we don't really even know, because he updated his draft board. Mel Kiper did. There's some other guys like Mac Jones is getting some play. There's a guy from BYU Wilson. There's also some other ones. So, you have Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. He's number one. There's also Kyle Pitts, the tight end, that's going to be pretty high. But like the 49ers already have their tight end. There's also Devonta Smith, like you said. Do you go wide receiver? I don't know. You could also do Jamar Chase. There's Waddle. I think there's some depth at wide receiver that do you draft the Heisman guy, or sometimes they don't work out. I mean, there's not that many of them. I guess the last two wasn't Tim Brown and Desmond Howard. They kind of worked out. So maybe that's as close as a short thing at wide receiver as you can get. Then do you go Justin Fields, Zach Wilson? I think those are the top guys, quarterback-wise. Mac Jones, maybe Trey Lance. I think he's raw. So do you some of those other guys you could get at 12? You only can trade up in this draft, I think, if you're going quarterback. And even where they drafted up or traded up, you don't know if you're going to get your guy. You just don't know it. So I don't know. But go ahead. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I thought it was interesting today that with Shanahan being present for Mac Jones's pro day, that they were saying that they think that's who the quarterback's going to be.
And that's what I'm saying. If you trade up for Mac Jones, why? You're trading for him, Matt. Let's say, because right now, the CBS mock draft, just because I had the tournament stuff up, so I just clicked on theirs because it was a header. They have Lawrence number 1, Zach Wilson number 2, going to the Jets. And then they have Mac Jones number 3. Would you're trading up for Mac Jones? I watched some of his pro day. He didn't look good at the beginning. He kind of calmed down, had some great deep throws and stuff. So I'm not really surprised there. But it's almost is his upside high? I don't know. How many Alabama quarterbacks have worked out? Same with Ohio State. I was looking at them going with Fields, but maybe teams look at that and they're like, Ohio State doesn't have a good track record. Either does Alabama. When you're playing
we have Tua and we have Hurts right now, so maybe they're trending upward on it.
But Matt, when you're playing with guys that are 5 stars all across the board and you're head and shoulders above the next team in your conference and you're lighting it up, what is the difference than if you're the quarterback at a smaller school like Trey Lance doing the exact same thing? I think there's a reason why guys at Ohio State and Alabama right now, they're recruiting at such a high level that they make their team look awesome because they have Heisman guys on their team. Alabama, I read that list. They had 2 guys that are in the top 10 of the mock draft at wide receiver on his team. It's okay. Yeah, and then you have a whole line that's so big and more talented and have better stars and even more depth than anyone else. It's okay, yeah, you can light it up. You can have high completions. I also looked and saw that he had a lot of checkdowns. Mac Jones did. He was second, maybe, or not even second, just outlet passes, where constantly a lot of his completions were just outlet passes. The other one that did that was Trevor Lawrence. I think that's part of Clemson's scheme, though, because I've been following Clemson for a while. And
that's exactly what Alabama's is now, because Saban talked about how his offense had to evolve because he was pissed that Auburn was beating him with their RPOs. And so he made the change to his scheme to make it be that way, to account for the changes in the rule.
And that's the one thing. They even ran more RPOs than Trevor Lawrence did. So you're looking at that, but is he really running the ball? No. As Mac Jones, you look at him and you're going to think that's a threat. I do think the interesting thing in this draft is there isn't a big-time defensive players until you get to Micah Parsons from Penn State at linebacker. Their mock draft has all offensive players. Waddle, Chase, 2 linemen, Slater and Sewell. And then who else do they have? Yeah, that's it. Fields ahead. So like their top 10, 9, or like I guess their top 9, because Parsons comes in at 9. The top 8 people are all offense. 3 quarterbacks, 4 quarterbacks. I just don't think, like, how many top quarterbacks like that are taken high work out. It's just not worth it to me. Like, I would almost rather just wait. Look at the top guys that are sticking around. You have Patrick Mahomes, a guy they got in the teens. Ben Roethlisberger in the teens. Tom Brady, 6th round. I know he's an anomaly, but throw that in there because you don't know. I know there's a lot more scouting now, and you get a lot more film on people, but still, trading up a bunch of first-round draft picks, and for a guy that now you're not going to be able to get him help in 2 or 3 years, like why? Why do that? And that wasn't even the only one. Let me go back and see here, because I had some other ones that were trading around. The Eagles is the other one. So they traded back to the Dolphins that 12th. So the Eagles got that 12th from the Niners, and they're going to give Miami the 6th choice. So it's like Miami knew that the 49ers wanted to move up. They're just going to backfill. I think that gives them even a better chance because now they can look at it. And if you had 2 first-round picks, go ahead. Draft your quarterback high. Do whatever you're doing. But the fact that you're getting rid of 3 first-round picks for possibly the 3rd best quarterback in that draft, it better pay off. Like, it better pay off. People are naming the 49ers the winner in that trade. I just don't see how. I think the winner is the Dolphins. They're going to get picks, and Tua right now has to be happy because they're going to be able to look back at this and say, all right, they have faith in me. Now they're going to be able to get me help in the next couple of years. But I don't know. What do you think of those trades and everyone moving around?
I have mixed feelings with it. I mean, I think when you make those kinds of moves, you have to be right. Like I feel like when Pittsburgh moved up to draft Roethlisberger, that was a perfect situation that they needed a quarterback. They were able to make the trade to move up to get the guy that they needed, and they had the running game and the line and the defense to support them. Where I feel like if you're jumping up, you have to feel like you have enough pieces in place that you can long term win with that quarterback. And for the situations like Roethlisberger, there are so many more where teams try to jump up and they end up with a Mitch Trubisky type situation where it sets the organization back. And everyone points to Jimmy Johnson's Dallas trade where he moved Herschel Walker, acquired a pile of picks, and then turned all those into a dynasty. I mean, he absolutely hit home run after home run after home run those following drafts with those players. Like, you have to hit when you're giving everything away.
And that's
or have the cap space in free agency to buy the extra players that you need to round out your roster.
Well, that's the other thing. The salary cap's down. So maybe just trying to get up and thinking, okay, we don't have a lot of room to move. Let's just try to rebuild. I would think the 49ers, the way they're trading, and they're saying they're going to draft the quarterback. They're going to put him behind Garoppolo, a guy that they obviously don't even trust. It's just a weird situation. Like, that's not a situation to learn from. Like, even Brett Favre, like when he was there, he was obviously pissed that they draft Aaron Rodgers, which led to him leaving and like them finally replacing him or whatever. But it was enough at first where they drafted him late in the first round. It looked like he kind of fell to them. And then they're like, look, we had a great guy. Now he can learn from behind one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Like, it was a really good Packers move. Like, the 49ers are doing the exact opposite, where they're like, look, let's trade up and let's see what happens. But I did want to talk about, before this even all went down this week, I really want to talk about quarterbacks in the NFL draft, because the big one, it still comes back to the Steelers. Everyone's been talking about it. I've even talked about them trading for Sam Darnold or someone when they weren't sure if Ben Roethlisberger's coming. And now it's kicking back up. I don't know why. because we already know the Steelers are kind of over the cap. They're like out of room. If they trade for Sam Darnold, they've already did their quarterback move. Like they got Haskins. There's really no room for a Sam Darnold on the team. And so if they make a move like that, you almost have to be thinking that he's going to be the future. They did exactly what I complained about in the regular season edition game, where last week, let's throw out Rudolph and see if he's still decent, which he played decent. So, I mean, as a backup, like it looked great. I don't know if he's ever going to take that step to become a starter. I don't know if Sam Darnold's going to take that step. He makes a lot of bonehead throws and a lot of bad plays. And I know he's playing with the Jets, so maybe giving him some weapons will turn that around. But at this point, it's like, why are you moving that? Why are you doing that? Because every year it seems like the quarterbacks are getting deeper and deeper in the draft, to the point where this draft now has, 5 guys that everyone considers first-round draft picks, Matt? So the Steelers could just sit back and wait. And if they wanted to grab someone with their first-round pick or whatever, they can just bring a guy in cheaper. He doesn't have the Jets in his head where he could have learned a ton of bad behaviors in the NFL. I wanted Sam Darnold when Roethlisberger wasn't looking like he was coming back. That was my main thing, is bring a guy in. Maybe Ben could come back for this year. He might be playing hurt or whatever. You can learn from him. But then they went and made some other moves. And so now it's like, why bring in another guy? Like they decided to go with Haskins. Just stick with it. Like, what are you going to do? Cut him? Cut him and then bring in Sam Darnold or cut Rudolph? You're not going to have full quarterbacks on the roster. But go ahead. I know you wanted to talk about this too.
Well, I had an outside of my brain moment today when I saw there was a poll question being asked, and I forget where it was, but they said, would you give up a second round pick for Darnold? And I thought, with re-signing Juju, maybe it would be worth pulling the trigger, because you'd rekindle that USC connection where they played together, they understand each other, and maybe you get more production out of Juju, getting his college quarterback playing with him and having that support. You know, when you're looking at people to hold each other accountable, that maybe Darnold's able to be like, hey, like, let's get it together. I mean, granted, he's not in a winning situation right now with the Jets, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't potentially develop that leadership going to a winning organization. You see those stories all the time of guys that they're playing on teams and can't win and get an opportunity with a franchise like Pittsburgh, and they take advantage of the situation.
But that's where I just don't understand where the Steelers would be going. Like, yeah, I thought let's make that move, get ready for the future. Like if Ben doesn't come back or whatever, you have Darnold and Rudolph hanging on with these guys. Maybe they can elevate them, because with Ben back, is Darnold going to become the backup? Like, are you going to be able to get trades for your other guys? Because like I don't even think of that situation that you would then need either Haskins or Rudolph. Like you got to move one of them. You got to trade them. Maybe that's the other guy is the backup, because you're thinking, I mean, Haskins on a 1-year deal. I can't remember what Rudolph's is right now off the top of my head. But when you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, what am I doing? And like, how far can I go from here? Like, how is this quarterback going to take me in the playoffs? Right now, the Steelers haven't been winning the playoff games. They get in the playoffs, they get an early ride home. How is one of those two guys going to push us to that next level? I don't know if it's going to. And so I don't know if that's going to be worth it. But anything else you wanted on that?
No, that was just one of the other things that I was thinking is like, I know there's with other teams, there's this push to try to find a quarterback, and maybe they have what they need in Dwayne Haskins, because I think the jury's still out on where he stands, because there was a weird, like, he was in a weird situation with Washington. So, I mean, they potentially could have their guy. I think they're definitely going to have some skilled players fall to him because of how crazy people are with the quarterbacks right now and trying to get that guy over the top. I just don't think, for a team like Pittsburgh, it makes absolutely no sense to try to jump up.
And that's where I think this year you just ride it out. Like, I think you're right. You just see what happens. You hope you have Ben. You see what you have in Haskins. Maybe if he gets his head on straight, you can potentially use him as that stopgap quarterback now instead of Darnold. I know it feels a couple weeks ago I was thinking all in on that. Unless you're thinking that you can bring in Darnold, draft a quarterback, because that's the other key. Because my plan along was like, you're bringing him in, you're going to get rid of Rudolph. You're not going to have Haskins around. You're going to have Ben, Sam Darnold, and then a rookie. And that's what you're going into the season with. And I think in that situation, then you're onto something. Because now you have a guy, and like I said, there are 5 quarterbacks. I don't, like, if you're going to trade for Sam Darnold, I don't feel comfortable taking a quarterback in the first round. So maybe they can wait and move that deal later. Like Sam Darnold, if there was high interest, the deal would have already been done. Like Garoppolo, the deal could have already been done. And I'm not even down on Garoppolo. Like, I could see the Steelers, like, what if after the 49ers make a draft move, what if one of these top 5 quarterbacks, because, like, no one's sold on the other guys. Like Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson. All 5 of them aren't going to be drafted in the top 20 draft picks. So maybe if there's one of them falling late in the first round or maybe early second, the Steelers can make a move, make that pick, get rid of their other 2 guys, and then everyone's thinking like, okay, what are they really doing? Bring a guy like Garoppolo in. 49ers are going to get rid of him. They can get rid of him for cheap. Because if they do draft one of those quarterbacks, I would think that they're going to be desperate to get rid of him. Because trading up and then having him sit on the bench is just going to be a media disaster. Because, like, that's my thing. But I don't know. Because there are a bunch of wild cards with those other 4 guys. Trevor Lawrence is the only guy that's a sure thing. I think that's why Urban Meyer came out and said, like, look, this is our sure thing. This is it. This is how we're going to go with it. And then that's final. Now, Justin Fields, high upside, played at Ohio State. No Ohio State quarterbacks ever worked out. Same with Mac Jones at Alabama. Alabama quarterbacks haven't been great in the NFL because, like I said, they have played with higher talent in college. When they get to the NFL, you don't have that anymore. Do they have that extra gear?
Alabama quarterback.
What was that?
I said recent Alabama quarterback.
I'm talking about Nick Saban.
Well, that's what I mean. You can't say, like, you threw all of the Ohio State quarterbacks. You had Snake Stabler and Joe Namath back in the day with Bear Bryant that had pretty good careers.
Well, Matt, I'm talking about now for them. I can't help it that Ohio State has never had a good quarterback. Even the guys you're talking about, Matt, people don't even know. People listening to the show, they have no idea who the hell you're talking about unless they watch, like, NFL history.
Why wouldn't you know your Raider facts?
They would know Joe Namath because he's in commercials. They say that guy that does commercials. I mean, like, you might know some Alabama guys. It seems like they're always in the booth now. So they know the game. And I'm not using that to put him down. I'm just using that as an unknown. Like, if you're going to put your entire franchise in the hands of one of these guys, haven't you seen it blow up enough from these other teams that you're like, what? If I'm the GM, what makes these guys different? Then the other 2, Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, just from smaller programs. I know BYU's not that small, but it's not like they're churning out NFL guys since like the 80s. back when they won the national championship. And then Trey Lance is from the smaller division overall, isn't he? From North Dakota State.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's not even playing D1 talent. That's a big unknown. You also have Kyle Trask, Matt. The Steelers could get him. Could you imagine if that was the quarterback room? Sam Darnold and him?
That would just be an absolute garbage quarterback room.
Wouldn't it remind you of like the Browns quarterback rooms in recent years?
Yes, that's exactly what it would be like.
But they don't have the hype. Matt, the Steelers would have so much hype with the quarterback room like that. Like you would have no idea. People would be excited. So I think that's my last thing. I wanted to kind of go through some position groups each week leading up to the NFL draft. The big thing, quarterbacks. Like I said, everyone knows who the top guys are. Trevor Lawrence of the Jags. You can pretty much book it. I don't think Urban Meyer would go against it. And I don't think they're going to do anything crazy. I think that deal will be done before the draft. Because why would you pass up that guy? Like, what if you give him up and then he leads the Jets to the Super Bowl? You would almost just be done. And the Jaguars, they need that guy. The other ones, I honestly don't know. Like, what teams, how desperate are you? And which guy you're going to go with? If Wilson goes that high because his pro day was so impressive, great for him. Like, I honestly thought that he impressed me. I know he had the one bad game where they really needed it the most to get them into the playoffs, or at least the conversation. I don't know if that actually let them in. But he had a bad game there. I don't know how much that should really push him down into the negative, but that's what I'm looking at for these the quarterback position. Next week we'll probably get into some of the other ones. But is there anything else for the NFL that you wanted to hit on?
No, I think I keep fingers crossed that we're going to get either a wide receiver or running back fall to us, and not just overdraft on a guy that defensively might fit what the defense needs.
Well, I think that's going to be what you're looking at. Like, I think the NFL, or the Steelers, I think they're going to make a push. Like, the defense has been there. I know they're definitely going to draft some guys to fill in some depth. I just don't know, like, where else they could go. They're going to try to get some movement because I don't think they're going to sign their guys back. Like, I'd be surprised if Juju, unless he lights it up this year, if he's back with Pittsburgh after next year. I mean, maybe he signs a long-term deal. If they wanted to give him one, they would have gave it to him, though. Like, they could have given him a 5-year deal for that amount. But the Steelers were supposed to have a bunch of cap room at the end of next year, so we'll see. We also got to see how many fans can go into the games and things like that, because if they're only doing half capacity, I think you're going to see this.
Goodell said they're going in. He put that out today. They're planning on being full capacity and back.
Yeah, but that's the NFL's policy. It goes to each state. There are still some states that don't have that opened up yet. So I guess it depends on the vaccination and stuff like that. Because if you get all of those in and then states are completely open, but like down in North Carolina here, I think that right now we're at 50% or something, 25%. I can't remember where we're at. So you're hoping that it's open to 100% in the fall, but I don't know if you can actually count on that being a done deal. But we'll see, because I hope so too, because I think that helps with some of the television like viewership and stuff like that. We'll get back into the NFL stuff next week. Some of the college programs started to do pro day and stuff like that. They've been doing spring practice, but with college basketball going on, we just kind of put that off for now. We'll get into college football stuff once the tournament's over, because I think we only have really this week and then next week recap show, because the Final Four's basically set. Gonzaga blew out USC as we were doing this show. Michigan and UCLA just started. So by the time we finish the show, we won't know who won this game. But you're locked in with Gonzaga, the overall #1 team. I still think they're on pace for winning the national championship. I know an undefeated season hasn't been done. They killed USC. And USC, a lot of people were picking for that upset. They just didn't have it at all. Then you have on the west, or I guess the other side of the bracket. It's not really the west side, but you have the Texas side where you're Houston and Baylor. Houston was down to Rutgers. Like, that's the one thing where I'm looking at Houston coming in, and I'm thinking they're down. They were down to Rutgers. I think what you're looking at is a Baylor versus Gonzaga national championship game. I think whichever team wins this game, UCLA, Michigan, I think they're just going to get – I don't think they'll get thumped by Gonzaga. Potentially they'll do that, but I think Gonzaga's just been the number one team all year. Baylor's been the number two team all year. They're going to match up in the national championship game, and that's just what – I mean, you have a crazy tournament, a lot of Pac-12 teams getting in, but I don't think you're going to see one in the national championship game. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's a pretty fair assessment. I think with the way the games have been playing out, I think that's exactly what you're going to see.
We can get into some of the recap from last weekend now. I told you officiating has been awful. And I wanted to just give a shout out too. I don't know if I still have it up, but there was actually an official that collapsed during the Gonzaga game. I don't know if you saw that. He said he got lightheaded. He backed up and then he fell. It looked like from the video, he clearly hit his head, like he passed out completely. But they had him calling at the halftime show. I think he's doing good. So prayers with him. I honestly am surprised that it doesn't happen more, because you have these guys that you're jogging back and forth with the players the entire game. And these aren't young officials, man. Some of them are up there in age. So it's just something that you would hate to see. And so I hope he's all right out there. But you want to give your rundown of the game and what you thought?
Well, one of the concerns that I had going in was guys getting into foul trouble. And sure enough, that was exactly what ended up happening. We got ourselves into foul trouble, and then I think it led to Michigan taking advantage of some opportunities. They got some easy points, and Florida State's shot selection down the stretch was absolutely horrific. I think they had the length to play, and I know you've commented before about the Big Ten being more of a physical league, and in the regular season, I think it prepares them better for the tournament, because when they are allowed to play that style, I mean, they play some great basketball. And I think, not to take away from Michigan's victory, but I think if Florida State plays, where they're in the first half where they were playing more competitively with Michigan, they were working the ball underneath. They were being a little bit pickier with their shots. I thought some of their shot selection, like I've watched through the course of the year, was suspect. And I feel like they were trying to force shots, and unfortunately, those 3-pointers weren't dropping. So when you're struggling to hit 3-pointers, you just don't have the momentum, and Michigan was able to capitalize on it. What did you think?
Well, I told you, I figured the game was going to be ugly. I just think it was the style of play of both teams. I don't know if it was really so much physical, but more just like ball control. I was kind of just wondering, like, when the breakdown happened, I think what happened is this year, the Big Ten and the ACC, they have all of those like matchups. They have the Big Ten ACC Challenge. They usually have a lot of crossover games just because a lot of teams share states. Typically, the ACC, when they talk about blue bloods, a lot of those blue blood programs are in the ACC. So when they say the blue bloods are down, they mean the ACC's down. They just don't come out and say it. So I think with the ACC being down this year, the Big Ten looking like they're better than the ACC, I think a lot of the media just assume that, all right, yeah, the Big Ten's better than the ACC. They must be the best conference. Like, if you're better than a conference with all the blue bloods, like, why wouldn't you be? And so I think you just have that logic where they're so stuck in, like, Duke's going to turn this around, or North Carolina's going to turn this around, or like Louisville, they'll make the tournament, or like Syracuse, like they'll be a low seed, but they're going to make that Final Four run. And then they had their chance. But I think with both of them being eliminated and the ACC getting no teams in, you still didn't really hear that. I think everyone's still talking about how the Big Ten lost all their teams. They had the most. It's like, yeah, but how much of that was just because the media overrated the entire conference throughout the year? I don't know. Because the rankings are the rankings. They use some computer stuff and how much of like the efficiency and things like that. But like when you're looking at the initial tournament setup, some of it is kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where year after year, if you put in 9 and 10 teams into the tournament, they're going to win, especially if they get favorable matchups. This year, it kind of didn't happen for the Big Ten, but next year, do you really think it's going to stop the Big Ten or the ACC from getting 8 teams in again? Like, no. People would just forget, especially if Michigan somehow makes it to the Final Four, which I would think they have a decent chance of doing. The only thing that scares me is the same thing that the pundits kept talking about Florida State. They were kind of saying about Michigan how they're taller, like they have more length. But it was almost like, all right, you can have that, but at some point you need to have the guys. And so I think like you saw Florida State's main scorer get into foul trouble, and I've complained about the officiating and stuff. Like you can't let some go and call it like lopsided and then try to make the makeup calls, because by that time it's too late. Like Florida State gets shut down, their guys already in foul trouble. That destroyed the entire game. Like it happened with Michigan the one game, and they were able to come back, and because they were playing like I don't want to say a lesser school, but they're playing a lower division school in like the earlier round of the tournament. But when you have the big guy get in foul trouble, it's going to affect the entire game. Plus, they didn't even talk about the Livers injury that much. I know that was something you were looking forward to.
I was, well, because the game got out of hand so quick, there was no point in bringing that up. I mean, had the game been a little bit tighter, I'm sure we would have heard more about how he wasn't playing.
That's what they just showed him on the bench now, because I have the game up as we're doing this, the end of the show. But I think that's the one thing where you had the Juwan Howard. He played for Hamilton with the Wizards, which I didn't realize. So they knew each other for like 20 years. And they even said, I don't know if you saw this, it might have been from the Michigan newspaper, but they had said that like Howard called him and asked for advice like about the Michigan job and coming and coaching in college and what he thought about it. So, I mean, there's clearly a respect there. But that's the one thing where I honestly think Florida State got screwed last year, because I think they were a Final Four team. Would they have won the national championship? I don't know. Like going back and looking, Kansas had a great team. Dayton's the one where you look at that and they're never going to get back, most likely, to that type of talent. Florida State had 2 NBA guys, and the guys that are currently on their roster, which was an Elite 8 team, right? Or no, that was a Sweet 16 team. So you have like the talent that's there. You lose 2 big guys. It's almost like Michigan kind of lucked into that, where they lost some guys to the NBA, where maybe they make a run last year, but with Hunter Dickinson coming in as a freshman, it almost changed the dynamic. Plus, Juwan Howard's such a low post like developer. That's what he's been doing in the NBA for the past however many years. I mean, he was involved in the NBA for like over 20 years now. So with that type of experience, of course your big men are going to play good. And so that's where next year, if Michigan can keep it going and these guys actually sign and don't go to the NBA G League, I think they can make a run and potentially just challenge that Big Ten status, where the Big Ten's usually Michigan State, and that's it. If Michigan can put a run together and somehow win a national championship, I think you're looking at close to blue blood status. They would have 2 national championships. They'd have a ton of Final Fours. However many, 4 Sweet 16s in the past 4 years. Florida State's right there with 3 Sweet 16s. I think they just need to make that next step of getting to the Final Fours. I don't know if Juwan Howard's going to stick around, if he goes to the NBA or what. But that's the one thing where if you're the Big Ten, I think you're just hoping that Michigan makes a run. Because a Michigan title with upsets over Gonzaga, and I would think Baylor, they would be underdogs. If it ended up being Houston, they might be favored. I don't know. But I would think that would help change that perception that the Big Ten really shit the bed this year. I don't know what else could do it. Like one team in the Final Four, I think everyone, at one point in February before Michigan got shut down for coronavirus, it was Gonzaga, Baylor, and Michigan was right there at 3. I think they went as high as 2 in the rankings. Yeah. And then like those were the top 3 teams all year. It's just a shame that Michigan has to play Gonzaga, because I would hate for that to be the best game of the Final Four, or like of the championship and the Final Four games, where if they were to make it, they play them close, and then Gonzaga blows out the team in the national championship game, which we've seen in the past. But that's my last thing. I did have one thing for the final bell, unless you had other tournament stuff. I don't know if you watched any of the other games.
No, I watched some of the other games. There was one thing with the tournament that I find interesting is that everything gets funneled to the March Madness app and the March Madness like stuff. But then when you go there, then it's like, nope, like you go to the CBS channel, go to the other channel, like it redirects you back to the other channels. Like, then why have it go to the website when you're just going to kick me back to the regular station?
That's the one thing at the early part of the show. I don't think there's people that skip to the end of our show and listen to the college talk, but who knows? I would assume most people listen to the Steeler Talk and turn it off. But I had to mention that because I didn't want to forget about the TV stuff. Like, it's just nuts that you would have Michigan, which I don't want to. I know everyone that listens knows that I'm a Michigan fan, but I don't want to say that Michigan's the most popular team that's left. But I would think that they're possibly 1-2 with UCLA. Like, right? Maybe USC, but I don't think their basketball program. If it was football, it would clearly be Michigan and USC. But with basketball, there's not a lot of basketball teams that are left. Like, Houston's not a national program. They haven't been relevant since the 80s. Baylor hasn't been relevant in 50 years. So just to have potentially the biggest matchup on Tuesday night at 10 p.m., like, I just think the NCAA is shooting themselves in the foot. And it's what I was going to bring up for the final bell. Because some research has started to come out that shows, I think we might have mentioned it, maybe we didn't, but like the NCAA had been putting out like March Madness tournament, NCAA tournament type promos, and they showed the weight room for the women's tournament and the weight room versus the men's tournament. The men's tournament was so much better. And then they blamed it on space. And then immediately they fixed the weight room for the women, which proved that it wasn't about space. So they lied. Because otherwise, why wouldn't you just fix it in the first place? But now some research is coming out as teams like Livers from Michigan and I think some other ones from the Big Ten. I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but apparently they tried to meet with the NCAA officials to try to do like a deal or like try to get some publicity during the tournament. And the NCAA tournament said, we're not available to meet until after it's over. Which, if anyone knows, if you're a basketball player after the tournament, no one in the media, no fans are paying attention to you push for your agenda. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so the fact that these guys are basically being silenced, I think Livers being hurt really hurts their cause because the media can just ignore him. He wears his not NCAA property t-shirt. The media doesn't have to show him. They show him a couple times a game, but it's not like he's leading the team in scoring like he was at one point, I think. I don't know if he was during the thing or not, but that's my one thing, where if they want to start paying players, they need to do it. And the research that came out that I mentioned that I obviously didn't even talk about shows that women are more likely to have social media followers, which means that in terms of like them doing like their initial countdown, that they would actually make more money than the male athletes, which I know it's just preliminary research. I would say that the top male sports athletes, like the guys that we talked about in the NFL draft, they have a higher ceiling. But I would think that a lot of the women, like you have a more of like a middle ground. Kind of like if you're thinking about it in terms of the NCAA tournament, Pac-12 had so many teams advance, they might not get a team in the Final Four. They just didn't have a team with that top talent. So I think you're still going to have like the top earners be male, like you see in the Olympic sports. But if you look at all the commercials, how many different women are able to just take that second tier and make a ton of money that they're not going to get to do because they don't make as much in the pros. So I think it really hurts women's sports. And I almost wonder, I talk about how, you might see like Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State, a couple Big Ten schools start to really throw money. How many of them already dominate women's sports that now if they're able to pay their women, that they just crush some of these other programs? Like, what's going to happen with UConn women's basketball if they have to compete? Because there's not that much women's basketball talent in terms of height and athleticism and stuff. How are they going to compete recruiting-wise if you say, like, he can come to UConn and we can get a national championship, and then someone else says, oh, you can just come to our school, we'll just pay you? Like at some point, I think you're going to see a major shift. And I said it with basketball, you're going to start seeing a shift towards these football schools because they have the money and they're able to start paying guys. You get a car dealership and they're like, hey, we'll sponsor one of your athletes. And I always bring that up. Like, what if it's Orgeron's Hummer place where he's doing commercials and they're like, hey, we need some athletes to do some spots. And they're like, well, we can get you some football players in the fall. And in March, we can get you some basketball players. Guess who's going to take that money? Of course they're going to get it. So then they're going to start paying their players more. The teams that have the more alumni, like Michigan has a ton, Penn State has a ton, they're going to start getting others that are able to like capitalize on the social media thing. I guarantee it. And I think the NCAA, they hope, like they need basketball conferences and teams like Gonzaga that rely on them for money to be successful. Like the NCAA needs that. They don't want conferences that are led by football and outside money taking money away from them. And so I think that that's why they don't want to do it. But I almost wonder if this research that's being now shown in favor of women, if that's the one that breaks the camel's back, Matt, that's going to be the straw. That's what I think is going to do it. Because I think with the women's soccer team trying to get more money from the World Cup and stuff where they're winning, why aren't they getting paid more than men? They're getting the same exposure. They're actually, winning. The men's program didn't even qualify for the Olympics, I think, again. Or was it the next World Cup? How embarrassing that you can't even make it. You're the United States. How many people do you have? Like, get real. So the women, I think, yeah, they might not play as many high-profile games, but they're actually winning championships. I think that should at least earn them more income than what the men make. Like, I know the men's World Cup makes more, but the soccer federation or whatever it is, they need to step in and just say, yo, you guys are winners. We're going to pay winners. And then maybe the men's program will get their act together. That's my thought. You have anything on that or anything else you want to hit on?
No. Check out southboundsports.com and continue to support. We appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely go to our website. Like I said, we're getting some stuff on. If anyone, I know we've been just pivoting slowly towards like more of just Pittsburgh Steelers NFL type stuff. So if you know anyone that's a fan of that, we're still going to hit college sports, some other things, maybe like baseball. They're going to have opening day. I know with Florida State, Michigan making it, those are teams we're fans of. So we're going to definitely hit on those, just like the Big Ten and the ACC and college football when that starts back up. But tell your friends, spread the word. We had a lot of people watching today. So I appreciate that. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.